Hi, I'm Alex, and this is a quick tour of the distribution machine. This is an app for looking at the statistical distribution of a metric or measure or a variable you have. And this is a very typical data analysis task. And the way to think about it, of what it does, is that it kind of shows a summary of all the values that you can have of your measure in a single picture. And this is useful to learn, to get insights about, understanding about your variable, like what is typical, the range it can have from what are the minimum values, what are the maximum values it can have, which are averages, but also how often do you expect to see minimum values. Things like looking for outliers when there's a value that is kind of so out there from everything else, then, that's a way how you can have insight about that. It's by looking at the distribution of your measure or variable. So let's look at the toy data set, which I have, that comes when you open this app online. And it's based on an e-commerce site data set that capture things like the spending score, profession, age, income, etc. And as a disclaimer, I don't know if this is real or not. I actually believe it's not. But, so take with a grain of salt. But this is just a toy example. Like, this app will make sense when you actually bring your own data set to learn about those variables, right? So that's the whole point of this, is making it available so that you can learn about your own data set. And I use it for my own insights. Okay, so the first thing we have to do, of course, is import the data. What you import into this app is a table. So it will be something that has a shape of a table. And on that table, the columns you have will be your variables that you want to inspect. They are like the dimensions, right? Thing like an age. We're going to look at an age, or annual income, etc., of all your population of your data set. So the first thing you have to do is to import it here. You can choose the format, either CSV or a tab separated file. And once you import it, you'll see the columns that it has been imported, the columns that come with that data set. You can also see here on the center the data types of those columns. And typically you only really need kind of to be aware of two things: if they are a number or if they are not, if they are some kind of category. So for example, gender, right, is not a number. It's an object here. Age, typically it's a number, right? A customer ID, this is a bit of an exception. In customer IDs are, it's something that you don't want to be doing an average of, but in the data, typically they come as a number. So I have here an example of how I imported it. So this is one of those cases where you might want to say to the tool that, hey, actually customer ID, you should identify it as a category and not as a number. So, and then you will see that reflected here. On the lower part of the tab, you have a couple of things you can do, of filters or preparing data. One is removing the rows that have missing values. So this is a very common operation, and you might sometimes have to do this depending on the data or the on the way you are looking at the data, and sometimes you don't. And then we have here a cool filter, but we're gonna use that I will come back to that. I will show that in soon enough. So once you have the data imported, there's three approaches we can take. The first one is called split by value. When we are on this tab, we can choose what dimension we want to look at, and let's pick age for now. And then we can see how many splits we want to do. So for now, I put just one to serve as an example. So if I put a split of 1, basically it means there's no split. Everything is into one bucket or one bin, how I call here. So this means that all of our ages are reflected here in this variable. So all of our ages go from 0 to 99 in our data, and we have 2,000 of them, okay? And they have a median of this, they have an average of that, etc. Oh, and the range is basically the difference, right, between max and mean. So this column tells you the range. If we split by values and we say, okay, split them by 2, it does what you probably think it does, which is say, okay, for the ones the first half of the values, which is 0 to 49, you put in bucket 1. For the second half, which is 50 to 99, you put on second 2, or on bucket 2. And then you can look at, okay, how does the bucket 1 compare to the bucket 2's? Right, and of course you can do those. That is for 2 bins, so you can add, you know, a collection more of them, and then you'll start to have, you know, your data into more bins, and you can start to have more insights. For example, how many people in my data set are between 29 and 42, and you can see that we have 320, which is about 16% of all my data. And for that group, I see that the average is 35. Okay, so once you have that, you can then scroll down and you'll see options for downloading that data, because sometimes you might want to take that to Excel, for example, to further manipulation or to present it in some other way. So you can do that here. And you can also, this is also for analysis to kind of have insights about it. You can plot it for each of the variables here, the statistical variables here in the columns, or these measures. You can select them here. So you can say plot the average for each bin. That's kind of the meaning of it. So you say bin 1 has an average of 6.8 years old. Okay, so the ones that go from 0 to 14, the average is 6.8. Yeah, so that's one way. This tab is one way of looking at it, at the data, of distributing the data. Another way is looking at what I'm calling here at the cohort size. So the first thing we do is, of course, the same as split by dimension. And we say split by age. And now the way this works is the following. So imagine you have all your population and you order them from the youngest to the oldest. Okay, and then you take the first 500 of the youngest, and that will be quantile 1 or bin 1 or bucket 1. And then you have the second, the next set of 500, and this will be quantile number 2, right? So that's how you do. You split by equal number of counts instead of by value. So that's the second way of looking at it, which is by cohort size. And this is a very typical way of splitting and analyzing data. And there are specific names for these even. So for example, when you split by 4, you will call them quartiles. If you, for example, split them by 10, you'll have deciles. And etc., right? 100, 200. So splitting it in this way is where you can answer questions like the average age for my top decile is something. In my case, 94, okay? And you can do this for age, salary, etc. So that's how you can get. And my lowest decile is this. And my mid decile, which is typically the median, is this, okay? Etc. and so forth. The rest of this tab is essentially the same view. But let me now point out one new thing, which is the sample of the data used here. So this is kind of an inspection window to the data which is being summarized up here. And it just shows the underlying data which is being used for this summary. And this is valuable when you start to play with the filter, which we saw on the import. So let me quickly show you what you do here. So for example, let's say we come back to this original filter, and now we're going to say, okay, profession is, for example, let's pick one, let's say engineer, okay? And now we go back to that cohort size. Let's say now we split by annual income and we look at decile, okay? So now that we split by engineer, and we can see here on the bottom, the underlying data now is reflecting engineer, we can say, okay, the top decile average salary for engineer is this, right? And then you can go back to the filter, change it, and you can see, for example, for another profession. And you can do that for any column you have on your data set. So you could do for age, you could do for family size, you can do by the number of years of work experience, etc. and so forth. So you can see how that starts to be potentially insightful, right? When you combine it with that that filter at the beginning. Okay, so those are two ways of splitting it: by value, by cohort size. The third one that I have here is for the cases when, you know, when sometimes splitting by equal bins is not what you need, right? There could be cases where you actually need to break them by, or do these bins by custom bins. Like you maybe want ages which are between 1 and 2, and then you want ages which are between 5 and 25, things like that. So there are, especially because there are some data sets which have some you know, very which have all different kind of distribution, and sometimes you might want to group them by that. So this is what you can do here. So you can actually click and edit this first table that you see here. So let me put here, for example, let's say 1 to 24, okay, or let's say 15 to 49, and the results get updated here, so you don't need to press anything else, just add it there and they will show up here. And this is how you can create custom cuts. There's a collection of things to know here, like they can, for example, overlap, and I made that on purpose so you can see in this first example. So this one goes to 124, the second goes to 15 to 49. So you can do whatever you want, the values can overlap. You can add more cuts here, can add the ones you want, and you can delete them too. There's some common patterns that I use for this type of custom cuts, which is, for example, just exactly like how many people have exactly 12 years old, let's say. Okay, so this is when it's equal to one value, right? So essentially what you do is put the same, the minimum and the maximum the same, and then you can go here and you can check that, and it says, okay, the first bin, it used the minimum from 12, the maximum to 12, and it says that the range between those two, that's another way to validate you're doing what you want, is 12. And you say that we have exactly one that has 12 years old. By the way, we are filtering for engineers, so that's why we have less data. So at this point you probably, you know, depending on what you want to do, but you might want to change that filter, or you just at least be mindful of it, and you should check kind of the data which is underlying that summarization up there. But nevertheless, you get the point of, there's a collection of tricks you can do by using this way of editing. You can do bigger than 5, and in the same table say bigger than 15, bigger than 25, bigger than 100, things like that. I often use myself this type of thing where I might have a table which is just kind of cumulative counts, like everything bigger than 10, 100, 200, etc. Or you can do also everything, or the counts less than 5, for example, less than 12, etc. So anyway, you get the point. That's what you can do in this last step, and all the rest is pretty much the same. It's like the same you've seen in the other ones. You can download and you can plot also the measures you have up there. So that's the quick tour of the distribution machine. I hope it's useful. Have fun. Bye-bye.